fancy myself a bit of an adventurer.
I sail out to uncharted islands, I climb mountains and snowstorms, I walk across frozen seas and sometimes fall through them and almost die. And at the end of a long hard day of adventuring, I like to relax on my couch with my furry friends and play an Arctic survival video game where I find myself on a strange deserted island, I climb mountains and snowstorms, walk across frozen seas and sometimes fall into them and almost die. And then the irony of that, it finally hit me. And we're gonna stop recording outside because the weather sucks and the storm's gonna come back in a second. Filming outside is such a great idea until a fucking storm rolls in. Video games are an escape, so why the fuck do I enjoy so much playing a video game that is basically just my life? I think it's because this particular game is exactly what I wanted in a game when I was a fat, unattractive incel teenager. I really loved survival games back where they were somewhat new. And I was an active member of the community of people that played all of those early access type of things that were developed and updated as time went on, including Project Zomboid back when that game was just a tech demo. But around 10 to 15 years ago, I kinda stopped playing them as I became more interested in narratively focused games again. And I think a lot of people are like me, and they used to play survival games when they were kind of shy. And now they are avoiding them because of that, and they are missing out on these absolutely stellar experiences. And this is one of the most unique games I have ever played. Not just survival games, but like unique games, period. And people are missing out on it. And I want to take you on a journey through it. So let's play some The Long Dark and see if we can make it through the experience without going into the long dark in the figurative sense, which will make sense at a later date. So our game opens up as we're just hanging out in our hangar. We are Mackenzie, a grizzled Arctic pilot who takes people where they need to go no matter how far out in the boonies it is. Mackenzie gets called up by his ex-wife who needs to go to Bear Island for some mysterious purpose that is classified apparently. It's implied that she is some sort of doctor person, and it's implied that the reason that they got divorced was because of the death of her child. We'll get into all of that later, but for now, they set off to Bear Island in Mackenzie's plane, and then a strange light appears, which is not supposed to happen because it is nighttime. The equipment in the plane shorts out and they crash. Mackenzie wakes up having been thrown from the plane and tumbled off a cliff and landed somewhere down below. Beaten and battered, he gathers what little equipment he can and lights a fire in a nearby cave. We somehow landed below the main crash site, so after regaining some of our composure following the traumatic event, we climb the cliff and then search for signs of our wife. We find no trace of her at the crash site, which is apparently good, because if there is no body, then she must have made it out alive. Descending the mountain, we enter a town that is seemingly completely deserted, except for one house where we see that the lights are still on. We enter it and are threatened by a blind woman wielding a hunting rifle, and through some shrewd diplomacy, we make a deal with the woman called Greymother. Now is the point that the game really opens up and we can start talking about the gameplay. Is also the point where the game began to become interesting to me, because I find survival games inherently uninteresting these days, because of how easy they are. And we're gonna get into why I think that and how this game avoids it at a later point in the story, but for now, let's talk gameplay. The Long Dark is an Arctic survival simulator. The basic goal of the game is just to survive, and the way we do that is to keep the 4 bars on the screen not empty. The bars are temperature, energy, thirst and hunger. And there is also a 5th bar, health, but health doesn't act like the other bars. We will get into that later. But the other 4 bars are fairly straightforward. Every time you step outside, your temperature is gonna start ticking down. The conditions you are in will determine how fast they go down or how fast they go up. Going outside when the sun is up and the sky is clear won't do much to take it up or down. The minute, however, the weather starts to change and the wind starts blowing, or the sun goes down or you become wet or somehow injured, that's the minute that the temp gauge will start to go down, and it will go down fast. Typically, what I do, like here where we are on an errand for Greymother to fill her food stockpile at the local grocery store, is that I make sure that I'm ready to step outside before I actually step outside. I make sure to be rested, have my hunger and thirst needs set, have emergency supplies ready like a bit of wood to start a fire and a tinder plug to do so, and some sort of weapon. Right now that weapon is a stack of pebbles and a flare to keep away wolves, but at least it is something. And then of course we also need to have a tiny bit of provisions of supplies just in case we need to seek shelter on the way due to a storm or an aforementioned wolf. And then I chart my course on the in-game map to make a mental note of the places of interest that I need to pass on my way to ensure that I'm on the right path. And then I set out. As you can see, because all of the meters are taken care of, the trip goes extremely smoothly. We arrive at the gas station super quickly and don't have to deal with the wolves that are just nearby, because our walking speed, due to being good meter readers, is significantly faster than it would have been if we were injured. We will talk about injuries later. But for now, let's keep talking about meters. We are at the gas station, and it's locations like these that we need to get familiar with and take mental notes of. Because we will need to come to places like these, and often we will need to come to places like these again and again and look for supplies to stock up with. The food here actually isn't worth much because it's mostly junk food, and there are better sources of food out around in the wilderness. But we will get into that later. But an important thing that you can always find in these places is drinkable water, because they always have a toilet and a cistern on the back of the toilet that contains nice clean drinking water that doesn't need to be boiled, and there will be situations where you will need to know where to get water in a pinch when you don't have time to boil it. And because we are out in the boonies, most stores will also have canned goods, which will replenish your health quite a bit, and if you cook whatever is in them before you eat it, you will recover more health and even get a buff to your stats. And here I have to correct something. Food doesn't replenish your health directly. Food gives you calories, and the more calories you consume, the more health you regain when you sleep. Canned goods give more health / calories than snack bars. And when you heat it up, it doesn't actually give you more calories. It just gives you a buff. It gives you a warmth buff. And some different types of food have different other kinds of buffs, and some of them can extend your max health. Thank you to Gerbrand for pointing that out. I post early access versions of all of my videos over on my second channel, so if you want to see what I'm working on while I'm working on it, you can go over there and check it out, and sometimes be like the lovely people that point out all of the mistakes I make. And since we are way out here, these stores also often have survival gear like lanterns and batteries for flashlights and many other things. And it has everything that Grey Mother needs to get her through the winter, so we make our way back to her and then replenish her stores. As per our agreement, Grey Mother tells us that Astrid, our ex-wife, was passing through here, but that she was taken away by some people, and apparently those people also made the other people who lived here in town disappear. There was an evacuation in place leading up to when our plane crashed, and there is a crashed prisoner transport on the outskirts of town, so it seems like the prisoners escaped and then started making trouble. The crashed prisoner transport is stuck in the middle of an avalanche, and the combined car pileup and avalanche has completely blocked the road leading from this town to the next valley over. Grey Mother tells us that she has something that can help us, but that it's locked in her safe deposit box, and that the key is at the old Milton farm. We make our way there and learn from one of the surviving prisoners that they did take Astrid, but that unlike all of the other townspeople who they ended up killing, Astrid escaped because she stabbed this guy and then crawled through a hole in the prisoner transport bus that led to the other side of the valley. We save the prisoner's life, get the safe deposit box, and then make it to the bank, before we realize that we need the bank manager's codes to open the vault. And because we find a key to his house, we get the idea that the codes are probably back there somewhere. It's really cool that the game doesn't actually tell us where his house is. It just expects us to go around town and look for a house that has a locked door, and then use the key on that door to unlock it, and then deduce that it is the bank manager's house. We do, and we find the key and head back to the bank. While searching for the bank manager's house, we entered a few other houses around town and picked up a few more safe deposit box keys. The interesting thing is that these keys unlock completely useless shit, because why wouldn't they? People wouldn't hide survival supplies in their safe deposit boxes for obvious reasons. They, of course, hid money and valuables, things that are completely worthless to us right now. The necklace that Grey Mother asks us to get is seemingly also completely useless because of the apocalypse. But upon returning it to Grey Mother, we learn that it was her daughter's, and that her daughter was an avid climber before she died. Grey Mother, in return for the necklace, gives us her daughter's climbing gear that we can use to scale the peak and get into the next valley. We do a final favor for Grey Mother and leave her daughter's necklace at her grave. And then we rappel down a cliffside. But just as we're about to touch ground, someone cuts the road behind us, meaning that we can't go back. Luckily, we find another rope that will allow us to send another cliff that will get us to a peak that leads into the next valley. And during that trek, we run into Methuselah, a character that we previously ran into at the gas station where we scavenge for Grey Mother's supplies. It is clear that he knows a lot more about what is going on than he is letting on, but we will get into that later. But for now, let's head through the tunnel here. As we emerge on the other side, we come across a hunter fighting a bear, and we grab the hunter's gun and fire. And then the screen fades to black. Flash forward and the hunter is very badly injured and recovering in a cabin, but he needs meds. Meds that we can probably find at a dam relatively nearby, as it probably has a small medical station or a medical wing, and it might also have some radio parts that will allow us to get in contact with other survivors, and this is the point where the game really takes the training wheels off. The dam is relatively nearby, but relatively is at least 5 times the distance that the Milton house or the gas station was from Grey Mother's house. We will need to properly prepare for the journey there, and it will take us more than a day's walk to get there, so we will need to survive our first night outdoors. This is also the point where the game gets elevated far beyond any other survival game that I have ever played, and I guess now we can talk about why I get bored of survival games so easily. Alright, so if you've been here long enough, you know that I break and manipulate game mechanics, and as you might know, I even made a series out of it where I played through New Vegas and Outer Worlds and other types of those games, while doing some dumb self-imposed challenge that usually required breaking the game in some way or another. More often than not, I actually ended up having an easier time completing the game during a challenge than I would have if I played the game regularly, even on higher difficulties. And that same approach that I have with challenges is also what makes survival games a drag for me normally. Because by their very nature, they want you to exploit them and thrive. And because a lot of them have hundreds if not thousands of mechanics and will be in early access for years before they are done, if ever, they have a lot of exploits, and I will exploit them, and I can't help it because I'm not even completely aware that I'm exploiting them half the time. Did you know that in Skyrim and Oblivion, if you don't do the first quest in the game, the dragons and the Oblivion gates won't appear in the world, and it will make the world quite a bit less dangerous, which will allow you to travel relatively unharmed and get properly equipped before unleashing all of those baddies, and doing that completely breaks the game's already very easy difficulty. But the Long Dark, despite having all of these same flaws, never lets the player become overpowered. That gas station we were in at the beginning of the game, you can survive in there very easily and get the achievement to survive 500 days very easily in there. Because as long as you have a safe base in a survival game, you can't lose. Unless you're a story-focused survival game, because then you probably won't have a base, or you will need to leave that base constantly and find a new base. We have to move. We have to leave the safety of the perfect bases, because the story demands it, and that's what makes this game interesting to me. Surviving in a gas station will only be fun for so long, but having to always be on the move and never be able to keep more stuff than what I can carry on my person, and having to make those tough calls whether to bring 3 extra cans of peaches or a strike steel in case I need to make a fire to save me from a blizzard, all of those otherwise boring choices are all of a sudden really interesting and really prevalent in this game. If it was just a regular survival game, I'd just put all of the spare food in a chest and I would never leave my home long enough to need a strike steel ever. So story mode doesn't just force me to go out of my comfort zone, it forces me to fully utilize all of the mechanics the game has, like hunting, but we'll get into hunting later. We managed to trek all the way to the dam in one go, but because I couldn't find the key, and it was nighttime and there were wolves, we ended up sleeping in a shed just nearby which contained a bunch of spare clothing, and I harvested that and used the scraps to mend my own clothing, which I guess is a gameplay element I neglected to mention until now. Clothing will wear down over time, and getting into fights with wolves and falling down will do serious damage to your clothes in the game. Clothes are essential for keeping you warm and dry, and the better shape your clothes are in, the more warmth they will retain and the more moisture they will keep out. My clothing was getting pretty knackered by this point, so having to seek shelter in the shed was actually a blessing in disguise. As a new day dawned, we found the key, we made our way inside, and we found what we needed as well as some extra supplies, of course. And then we started making our way back to the hunter. I had learned my lesson from last time, so I had actually mentally made a note to stop by a scout cabin on the halfway point between the dam and the hunter's cabin, and I spent the night there, which meant that I spent less time walking outside while being cold and in the dark, and as a result I ended up consuming a lot less food and water on my way back. I cannot stress enough how satisfying it is to carry out a successful trek like this. Making good choices, planning and knowing when to quit can make such a difference. After making it back to the hunter, we get a mission to go get a mythical bear killing spear to kill the bear that has been stalking us. And getting there took me 4 nights because I managed to fall into a frozen lake, get caught out in a storm, and get attacked by wolves several times, and I had to constantly stop and make camp to dress my wounds, sleep a little, eat and get my health up. But after I got the spear and did some other stuff that we'll talk about in a minute, I managed to make the trek back in less than a day because I actually took the time to throw out the stuff I didn't need in my backpack, making me faster. I got my needs taken care of before I set out, and I made better choices with the wolves, like shooting first instead of hoping for the best, and also made the choice of not falling into a frozen lake because that's dumb, and it was unreal making it back that fast. But let's rewind a bit. So, mythical bear killing spear. Yeah, the game gets a bit weird and does this cool thing where it treads the line between supernatural and natural. A lot of the things that happen in the game can be read as supernatural or completely natural, and it's just the people who believe in these things are just a bit superstitious, like Greymother. The way she frames the people that attempted to take Astrid makes them seem like they were Wendigos. And seeing as we've only encountered one live one, I guess they could be. The wolves also seem to stalk us like they are supernatural demons. And they could be, or they could just be very hungry. And the bear that is stalking us could be stalking us because it's a pissed off spirit of a 150-year-old ancient dead bear. Or it could just be a regular pissed off bear. This is actually something that happens in real life as well. Anyone that has spent enough time outside will tell you that there are no werewolves and there are no skinwalkers. But we all have stories about weird unexplained phenomena that happen to us. Not because there are supernatural things out there, but because we find ourselves sometimes in situations where our brains or our mental faculties don't have the necessary information to decipher what we are seeing, and also because we sometimes feel a little isolated and a little I don't know, a little vulnerable when we are out there all by ourselves. Like, there was a situation I experienced this summer where a deer ran up to me and it started barking, which is not something that deer is obviously like supposed to do, right? And it weirded me out for a while because, you know, it's a barking deer. I had seen chronic wasting disease before and it wasn't that. But then months and months after, I learned that, yeah, when deer are in heat, which this deer probably was, they can actually exhibit this behavior. And it's completely natural. But when it happened, it was extremely frightening. But there are also things that I have experienced that I still don't have like a rational explanation for. But maybe I'll talk about those another time. I don't think now is appropriate. But my point is that, like, this whole thing where it blends like what is real, what is not real, that is very much true to life in my experience, because this does happen somewhat to us people who go out there. In either case, a massive spear will probably be good for killing it, since shooting doesn't seem to do anything. Whether that's because the spear is magical or because it's just a giant fucking spear. We arrive at the cabin where the mythical bear killing spear is, but it's broken, so we trek to a nearby machine repair shop and repair it. There's also something going on with the wolves whenever the Borealis is in effect, and it also seems to affect electrical installations as well, and that's weird. And Methuselah, he seems to know something about it. We are probably gonna have to talk about that later. Anyways, we fully repair the spear, make our way back at rapid speed like I mentioned earlier, dodge the bear a bit and then make it back to the trapper. With the spear, we can now stand a chance against the bear, and Jeremiah, confident in our abilities, sends us out into the wilderness to salvage radio equipment from 3 towers in the hope that he can use the supplies to fix the radio at the cabin and get in touch with other people around Bear Island. It's a fairly straightforward affair. There are 3 towers marked on our map and we need to trek to each one of them to look for supplies. The appeal is not the destination but the journey, and I think missions like these are absolutely perfect to illustrate that it's not how interesting the story is itself, because this and the game in general is pretty light on story. It's how it's all framed. And I guess this game can also be used as an argument for gameplay being more important than... I don't know where I'm going with this. There's an argument in there somewhere that a smarter person could make. The point I'm trying to make is that you don't need a masterfully crafted story to keep the player engaged, and there doesn't need to be a whole lot of story. You just need to give the player enough motive to do things and then the abilities to do them and put a challenge in front of them that will be worth overcoming. Actually, that was pretty smart. Thank you, me. Speaking of challenges to overcome, the way the spear is used is that you take it out and then you ready yourself by pressing the right trigger. Readying will consume stamina, so you will have to time it right so that you don't run out of stamina before the bear reaches you while it's charging. But also time it right so that you actually get it out completely before the bear charges you. Fucking either things up will result in a very prolonged bear mauling sequence where you really get to sit and think about how much you fucked up. After a few failed attempts, I managed to get the timing right and fended off the bear at each tower I got to. About a week later of in-game time, I had salvaged what I needed and was heading back to Jeremiah. The bear didn't want me to leave, however, so he ambushed me and dragged me back to his lair. And here I snuck through his cave, and sneaking can be a very valuable tool to survive encounters with wildlife that you are otherwise unprepared to take head on. If they can't see you, they can't chase you, and like here, if they can't get you in a small crevasse, then they obviously can't chase you through that small crevasse because they can't get to you. Using a bit of that stealth and the tiny crevasse magic, I made my way to the spear and got in the final battle with the old bear, and I finally managed to kill it. Okay, fine, I'll tell you about the weird experience that I had that I still don't really know how to explain. So, I am in Sweden. I see this dried out riverbed, and I was like, oh, that's a fucking adventure, because if there's a dried out riverbed, there's a story, right? We can hike up to where it dried out, and we can figure out why it dried out. So I'm following this riverbed, and I hear this droning sound. And this droning sound, it just sounds like when you hear a motorway, like, really far away. So I'm just like, it's that thing, right? I know that there's a city, I think like 50, 60 kilometers that way. I just figured it's that, and we are on a slope or something, so we can hear the motorway. Even though it was a little bit weird because there was like a bunch of trees, and usually the trees would block the sound. But anyways, I'm following this riverbed, and it's on an incline upwards. And I'm following, and I'm following, and I'm following, and the drone sound keeps getting louder and louder. Then it gets a bit weird, because the incline stops. There's like we crest a hill, right? And then the dried out riverbeds, it goes down again, which is not supposed to happen because water flows downwards, right? It doesn't flow upwards and then that way. Super fucking weird. And then I sort of like look down, there's a forest down below. And I see this like force coming towards us, like a very small located piece of wind that is like moving towards us. I can see this like snake tail of wind just moving through the trees, making them rustle. And I sort of noticed that all of the bird sounds that I've been hearing all day, they are just fucking gone. And I start to freak out a little bit because that thing is coming towards me and it's clearly following that riverbed. And I'm just mesmerized by it happening, and I don't really know quite what to do. I'm not frozen at all in my step, but I'm just kind of like, what the fuck is going on? My brain can't pass what is going on, so it doesn't know how to react. But then all of a sudden I just get this instinct to like, I should move away from this riverbed. So I step outside and I sort of like, take cover a little bit. And this wind thing, it just blows right past me, following the riverbed. And it just reeks of rotten eggs. And I noticed that I'm crying. And I think I was crying because my body didn't know how to interpret what was going on. So it was like, okay, tears it is. And I still to this day have no idea what happened. Like I figured that maybe there are some like tunnels underneath, and there was like a weird natural gas whatever thing that was passing by, and that is what the rotten eggs are, because I think the rotten eggs means that it's sulfur. But yeah, no rational explanation, never figured out what it was. There have been weird disappearances in that forest, so maybe there's a weird geological phenomenon that just happens in that forest, or maybe there's a weird wind fart snake that is haunting the forest of Sweden. Who the fuck knows? I never told anyone really about this until now, but yeah, that's the weird thing that happened to me. Back at the cabin, Jeremiah fixes the radio and we manage to make contact with someone else. But before we can get any concrete answers, we are cut off and the radio shorts out. Jeremiah isn't well enough to travel, so he sends us off to the dam. There is a door there that leads from the dam into the valley below, but it requires power, which is a bit of an issue in the geomagnetic apocalypse, except that when there is a Borealis, the electricity starts to flicker on and off and the wildlife goes nuts and tries to kill us. So we end up hanging out with Methuselah outside the dam and we wait for nightfall and the Borealis, but it doesn't come. I figured this could happen as the Borealis doesn't seem to happen every night. So I decided to use the time to go hunting because food obtained from rabbits and deer is a lot better and will keep us full for way longer than snack bars and other junk that we've been finding in people's drawers and glove boxes. The only issue is that hunting is hard and there's a lot of stages to it and it requires a good amount of time. So first step is of course to kill the prey. Rabbits are pretty easy relatively. You pick up a rock or set a snare and then you wring their necks and then prepare them at a fire. They don't weigh a ton and you can carry a few in your backpack without really noticing. Anything that requires a gun however to kill is a bit of a problem. The rifle we have is not super accurate and it only has one of those like stock sights. I did find a weapon cleaning kit a while back and I have been able to keep it in relatively decent condition, but even then, hitting anything is the roll of a dice. My tip to hunting deer: wait for relative darkness, approach them from the direction of the wind, creep up on them as close as you can get. You will know the right spot when they start to begin to get uneasy, because they will look up and they will try to see what's going on, and then you aim the reticle directly down center mass and then you pull the trigger. Sometimes they will only be winged and they will run off, and I don't recommend that you chase them, just let them go and let them be wolf food. When you've killed a deer, gather enough wood for a 6-hour fire, and then skin and dress the deer, and then you have 8 to 10 kilos of delicious deer that you can cook at a fire. It is absolutely worth it. And I made sure to regularly take time off my main mission to go hunting, because 8 kilos of deer meat fills up way more hunger than 8 kilos of snack bars. So in the end it saves time by making us spend less time looking through cupboards and fridges for out-of-date tomato soup. Our timing couldn't have been any better. As we finish dressing the deer, the sky turns bright green and we know that it's time to enter the dam. We head inside and sure enough, we flick on the power to the elevator and it works. And we take it down another level that will have that opening that we will need to get into the other valley. However, as I accidentally got myself electrocuted a tiny bit, I got distracted and while I was a prisoner from the group of escapees managed to sneak up on me and take me hostage. He asked me a bunch of cryptic questions before knocking me out and then... We're not Mackenzie anymore. We are Astrid, the person that we've been looking for, and we are a bit in the past it seems, and I hate this. I think it's terrible. I don't know why media has started to do this, but a lot of stories these days will have something interesting happen, and then take a break from that to tell us what some irrelevant side characters had for lunch 3 days ago before the climactic event happened. And it sucks. I don't care about Astrid. I don't care that she was safe after she climbed through the broken bus by a creepy weirdo who keeps bodies in her basement. I don't care that she helped a town with rescuing a bunch of plane crash survivors and preparing them for the winter. I don't care that she ran around with a cool pistol and a bow and arrow and fought wolves and shit. I don't care about Astrid because Astrid is not an interesting character. But I have to preface something here. I do not hate women, and I want you to keep that in mind. Because I am also a Scandinavian man and we do not do subtlety, so Astrid was interesting when she was an object and a goal. The breadcrumb trail she left behind was interesting, and it was interesting that our search for her got us in contact with a lot of other people, include us in on what was happening in the world. Her actual being is dull and boring. All of the stuff she does is cool, but it doesn't matter and I don't care. I just want to be Mackenzie again so that I can continue his story. Knowing that Astrid escaped through the dingy Cross prison bus, survived and thrived, makes his story less interesting. Because we know she survived now. We know she's fine. We know too much, and we just need to get this over with. Storytellers, The continuation of the climactic point in your story should be the continuation of the climactic point in your story, not a flashback to a bunch of shit that happened in the past that actually ruined the suspense of what just happened in the climactic point in the story. Please, seriously, fucking stop doing this. It's so fucking bad. But what does happen with Astrid? Well, aside from the whole body in the basement thing, the game tutorializes the healing mechanics 20 hours into the game, and I don't know why, because by this point the player has already figured out how this mechanic works to a point, or they have rage quit. Since we are Astrid, and we've been saved by the creepy old basement lady, we are a bit knackered from that whole ordeal, and as a result our health bar is decreased. See, how health works is that it will be full unless there is something wrong with you. If you get a sprained ankle, it will take a chunk of your health, and it will penalize your max health as well. To get your health back, you're gonna need two things: time and to dress your wounds and injuries. If you don't dress your wounds and injuries, the penalty will be permanent. How this works is that if you sprain your ankle, you will need to bandage up and take painkillers, and after a couple of days of not getting into trouble, the sprain will heal and your health will recover. Naturally, animal bites and scratches will need to take longer to heal and require more resources to attend to. Like wolf bites come with a risk of getting an infection, and for that you're gonna need antibiotics or a similar natural remedy, and those can be hard to come by. It's all around a really good system, and I kind of like that the game forced me to lay down for a few days following a fight with a wolf that went badly, so that I could get my health up before going on another trek to face another wolf. And low health scenarios were really scary. It's a good system, and I like it a lot, unlike this chapter with Astrid, which sucks. Not because I hate women and see them as objects, but because this woman was only interesting when she was an object. Like, damn, why are we here? Like, this is so fucking boring and it's so fucking pointless. Normally these types of over-explaining chapters in media shed a light on some lore mystery or plot mystery, but this doesn't. This feels like one of those self-contained story modes that the developers release after the main game is done, for those fans that need to know every little secret bit and extra lore about every character in the story, and get some light shedded on some mysteries that were never fully explained in the main story. Except that they actually forgot to put all of the interesting backstory and lore in there. As Astrid, we'll leave the farm, find a church, find a priest, learn that there's a plane crash and that there are more survivors than the ones that made their way to the church. We go to the crash plane, find a manifest and the IDs of the dead, and we then make our way back to the church and inform the various survivors of the fate of their loved ones. We then search the area for potential stragglers and find a couple of those while dodging a literal wolf pack, which is like the bear Mackenzie fought in his chapter, but a lot less polished. Instead of just fighting the bear until it fucks off, the wolf pack has a bar that will disappear the more you damage and scare them. Except that it doesn't really work, and some attacks like shooting a flare into the air will take a big chunk of their bar away, but actually shooting a member of the pack will take a small chunk away. Sometimes, because these standards are not solid, you cannot rely on flares taking off a big chunk of their bar, because they will sometimes only take a small chunk of the bar, and sometimes shooting the gun at the wolves or near the wolves will make them completely fuck off instead of just taking off a little bit of the bar. And sometimes they'll just disappear on their own, and sometimes they'll hang out for almost a real world hour until you decide to take the fight to them and shoot them in the face with a fucking flare gun. Which I will admit was a big dick moment, and I laughed out loud when it happened because I was not prepared for it to work. And you know what? Neither was the game seemingly, as it didn't really know how to react. And the wolf, after getting hit in the face and seeing the flare bounce off its stupid fucking head, just kind of keeled over after a small delay. There were intense good moments and funny moments like this, like fending off a pack while also defending a stranded and injured survivor. But the entire thing was definitely poisoned by the buggy mechanics and the buggy wolf AI, which had already been an issue in the previous 2 chapters, so I don't know why they decided to make it a fucking boss mechanic. And finally, poisoned by the fact that the encounters were very scripted and would happen at the exact same points during a trek that you would expect them to. But all of that would have been fine if the story was at least interesting, and it's not. After rescuing the stranded survivors, we have to prepare the church for an incoming blizzard, which means that we have to go on a series of scavenging missions to get enough food, fuel, meds, etc. to last them through that. It's fine as it gives you an excuse to hunt for a bit and also investigate some of the side objectives, but the side objectives aren't interesting either. Astrid seems to be concerned that the prisoners who almost killed her might have made it into the valley and somehow followed her, and then we discovered that they did, but also that they are dead, so it doesn't really even fucking matter. Following the completing of the blizzard prep, we then head off to a radio tower and learn what we already knew. that Mackenzie is alive, as we hear him on the radio, which we already experienced from his perspective when he was trying to get into contact with the place where we were going by plane, and where Astrid decided to head after crashing. And upon the revelation that Mackenzie is going to the place where they were both going when they crashed, and where she decided to go because Mackenzie would probably go there as well, Astrid decides to go to the place that she was already going to and makes her way through an abandoned mine and powers an elevator and learns, like we already learned as Mackenzie, that the world is fucked and this event is probably larger than just Bear Island, as we see the corpses of several beached orcas and the strange Borealis.
And I don't know what I'll find when I get to where I'm going. But what I do know is this. Mackenzie is alive. And he's heading to Perseverance Mills. And that means I have to get there before it's too late. I may not be able to stop this darkness from coming, but I'll be damned if I'm gonna let it happen without a fight.
From there, we don't actually go anywhere. I thought by now that this game would be feature complete, but at this present moment there are only 4 of the 5 chapters out. What is here is mostly fantastic, with the exception of chapter 3 of course. But aside from the story mode, which is called Wintermute, there is an extensive survival mode that has its own challenges and sub-modes with little self-contained stories to play. It's one of the most interesting survival games I have ever played. It doesn't have zombies, but it's still incredibly engaging, and it uses real-world science and survival mechanics as inspirations for its mechanics, but without making them too realistic so they become boring, and the result is incredibly compelling. In the meantime, I will probably be playing some challenge mode, and I might even make some videos about those modes. And chapter 2 of the video will be out whenever chapter 5 is out, if it ever comes out. We'll see, I guess. But yeah, that has been it for me. Thank you very much for watching. This has been a project in the work of mine for, I don't know, 5 years at this point, and I hope you enjoyed watching it.